Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train, episode 205. This is the episode of grass, and other kinds of grass, and more kinds of grass, and herbal space program every day. I have not yet gotten into it in the video, but, you will see. About 2/3 of this video is dedicated to me placing grass blinds, just to get an area sort of in ship shape looking. But anyways, this, Oh, I don't have written down who asked this question. I know where it was. Hold on. I need to go find it now. Because it's on my channel somewhere. It's over here. It's over... Where is it? Created playlists. Did I not create a playlist for this? I feel like I should have. It was from when TBA and I were playing Portal. What episode was it? Episode 6. Saving Science. There we go. Alright. Two things. Oh, here we go. Oh yeah, so I did the lubricant. And did you go through Tornado Alley at any chance? Thanks. That was by Captain Tank Traincraft. Now, the thing to note about Tornado Alley is in my head, it's largely synonymous with the Great Plains, and I've talked about the Great Plains to a great deal. But the thing I can talk about, because if we're talking specifically about Tornado Alley, and making light of the natural disasters that often occur there, is we're left with the times where we did have to deal with these natural disasters, which at the beginning was pretty few and far between. We'd come upon sites where it's, clearly a tornado is going through here and really F some stuff up. Either are there survivors? We had a couple of those out in the Midwest, although we did not spend a lot of our time really out in the Midwest for reasons that I have gone over. We did have to deal with a handful of natural disasters in other places. We had a handful, I guess. I was going to say a couple, but there were more than two. There's just two that immediately spring to mind. But a handful of very large forest fires. A hurricane. One hurricane that was particularly bad. And then a few other ones that we just had to deal with. Plenty of blizzards, snowstorms, rainstorms. Just the kind of things where... Oh, wow, this is really significant. Washington, D.C. flooded really, really heavily before we had to go through there. At some point, I can't remember when that was, but that was before the Zombie Train Incorporated. That was before Firefall, so it was before I met Weibold in person in New Orleans, where we had to weather one of those hurricanes that I was referring to. And it was... What else? We weren't there for it. We just got to see the aftermath of it. And that was a wreck. It did wipe out, not completely, but to a certain extent, some of the people we were working with in D.C. They were the seafarers. And they were trying to get a destroyer up and running. One of the destroyer that used to hang out in D.C. I don't remember the name of it. But anyways. Oh, I think it's the Barry. It's like... I don't know. Whatever, I'd have to look it up. They didn't get that ship working in the end, because there weren't a lot of them left at that point, and so they basically evacuated the city and called it a day. But out in the Midwest, we didn't really go that far out there. We didn't go that far west. We didn't go into that area of the country until the Zombie Train Incorporated came around, and then it was every once in a while we'd hear back from one of our trains that, a tornado's come through and either done some damage to the track or done some damage to a town. Hurricanes coming in and destroying the tracks that are along the coastline there. And, places like that. We had a couple of seaports that we were trying to get up and running. One of them in between New Orleans and Houston. It's this sort of inlety area. It's called Port Arthur. and we were trying to get that place working. We'd sort of segregated part of the town. The problem is, it's right next to another town called Beaumont, which was not safe at all. And that was something we were waiting on, but we were doing pretty well with Port Arthur, and then it got hit pretty hard by a hurricane, and that was really the end of that. Out in, Oklahoma, we didn't do that much out there, but in a lot of these places that are nice and big and flat, you can get clay reserves, and we were using clay to build buildings, and etc., etc. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of food to be made out there, but at the same time, we didn't have a lot of people that required mega farms. It was just some of the smaller stuff would do. Out in Oklahoma, though, there's a line that runs kind of through the middle of nowhere, but we had taken to using it. And there's a tiny town called Avard, A-V-A-R-D, which formerly was the confluence of a couple of rail lines, but now it just acts as a junction. And the thing is, the line that runs from there, it runs eventually into Tulsa, but the line that runs from there gets down towards New Orleans and gets down towards... It runs into the south, and it runs into the Appalachian Mountains on one hand. And on the other hand, it runs north, and it runs more or less towards Chicago. And these are roundabout ways. These are roundabout routes that we would take to avoid major population centers like Oklahoma City. That was in fact the main purpose of going out here. Because we had a couple of options, but one of them was washed out pretty significantly. And the other one was through Oklahoma City. And the other end of this junction heads down into Amarillo first, and then heading out towards Albuquerque and things in that area, which there was a little bit of a heart of industry that started up over there, just out of sheer luck and location. And we were using that as a through route that didn't run quite all the way to the coast, but eventually did. Eventually we sort of punched through with our efforts to revitalize things and run around to California. And that was our way into SoCal. That was our way into Southern California. And of course that would run up to San Francisco. But the thing about Avard here is it's a tiny town with a handful of buildings, which, it was formerly a railroad town. It's still got a coal tower sitting there, or a coaling tower. Or that's a grain elevator, I think. I don't recall. It's got a quarry and a reverse loop and some other stuff. But as far as railroad goes, it's kind of useful. It's got a Y, it's got a reverse loop, it's got a couple of grain elevators, it's got a quarry, and it's got space for facilities, which we did fill in. But before we even got that far along with it, and this was a make or break moment for this line, and it ended up being this. This is the Avard line. If you're going to Southern California from the area near Chicago or from south, you're generally going to go through Avard. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but whatever. And so we were preparing to build it up. Now, this, however, because there were so many possible routes, and so many of them are, ignored, and we had to be sort of picky and choosy about what we wanted to do, what way we wanted to go, and this ran through the middle of effing nowhere. There was some contention in the Zombieton Incorporated over whether we were going to rebuild. We were going to build our facilities at Avard, or we were going to build them someplace more northerly. There was another junction-ish place, but that needed some track work. It was much larger. It didn't have any free space. I'm looking for it now. It was much more up. It was It was in Kansas. Oh, it was, okay, Great Bend. And, yeah, so it was, are we going to go for Great Bend, which needed to be cleared, or Rivard, which had nothing there at all? And so we're getting ready to bring trains of supplies out to Rivard after a long period of contention, and after some of our forces being beaten back from the other city. And we get there, and a tornado of some significant size has ripped through. A good number of the houses are gone, one of the grain elevators is missing, one of the Y tracks is completely ripped up, along with part of the main line is blocked because the elevator fell on it. There's just piles of dirt, dust, everywhere, and debris all over the place. It was something where we get out there expecting to have it easy, and suddenly we've wandered into a disaster area. And this is one of the few projects where I had come down. There were two trains that were going to meet there. I was coming down from the Chicago area, and Wildwood was coming in from the southwestern area because he was working with the industry, and we didn't quite meet because we couldn't, but we both pulled into the area around Rivard, and I got a pretty damn hard "I told you so." And then he realized that he was literally stuck there because there was no other way around. So it was, well, we're going to be fixing this anyways because we need to get this train out. So let's get to work. And so we did. That area continued to have problems because there was some stuff. A lot of it was on almost floodplainish area, and we had a couple of flash floods that would lead very quickly to washouts. We had one pull off the back of a train that was running because they thought they could make it, and they really, really couldn't. And thankfully that didn't lead to the loss of an engine or the loss of lives, but it did lead to the loss of a lot of supplies for a period of time before we got out there. And of course, due to the fact that we were pretty buddy-buddy with the National Oceanographic and Aeronautics Association, NOAA, and they would try to do our weather forecasting as best they could, but they didn't have access to all of their stuff, so naturally it was pretty hit or miss, and we ended up with a lot of engineers who thought they were, something else, who figured they were going to take the chance, when in reality, had we had proper equipment to be able to, see the storms and see where the clouds were moving, high pressure zones and low pressure zones, we would not have in our right mind sent engineers, even allowed anyone to go out in that weather. Because it was so very clear, or it would have been. And, these are the kind of things where we're collecting data over long periods of time, and we're seeing that, things typically look like this before there's a tornado and a significant problem, a disaster. Things typically seem to be like this leading up, and this is with NOAA's rudimentary-ish equipment. Rudimentary compared to what they were used to using before the war started. And then, when they got that equipment back, it was, let's corroborate our findings here with what seems to lead, with what we know leads to a tornado on these instruments here. And you look at them, and you go, oh, wow! It's the kind of thing that we didn't know meant anything until we had other instruments to corroborate it. It was, oh wow, this sort of looks familiar, but we're not sure if it actually has any correlation. And then you compare it with the instruments that what the readouts look like when there's going to be a tornado, or when there's going to be a flash flood, or something like that. And you go, oh wow, these match up perfectly. And that, that led us into some trouble with, a few things. Mostly out there because the weather's so damn unpredictable, but also up north with some nor'easters and, down along the coast with hurricanes and stuff like that. We just didn't have the eyes that we were used to having. And so it was basically just run the train until there's a problem. If it seems like there's going to be an issue, it's up to the engineer if they want to take that chance. And more often than not, they took the chance, and more often than not, they were okay, but sometimes they weren't.